Hi everybody. Okay, so we're getting ready to start our unit on acting. I have my key concepts, our key concepts, for the unit on acting listed here. The first thing I'm going to go over is the definition of actors. Then we're going to cover a brief history of acting. Actors today, the actor's tools, approaches to actor training, and levels of characterization. You will have 2 class assignment worksheets that I will put in Blackboard for you to complete on this unit as well. Okay, the basic definition of an actor is a person who portrays a character on stage or film. You will hear the term actor often used as someone who's doing something. There's a car chase and the cops stop the bad actor from fleeing the scene. I hear that a lot more often today, so I do want to be very careful that you guys understand I am talking about somebody who is in a play or on film. Also, as I go through the slides about the history of acting, do consider that what we today think is appropriate or good acting, as in the performances, is also very different from the past. It's a level of artifice that we try to hide now, both on stage and in film, that in the past, you notice I have great masks here, was not hidden. Everybody wanted to see you be an actor. So keep that in mind as I go through the history of acting, because when we talk about acting today, that's what we're going to focus on. So let's move to history. As we go through the different time periods, and trust me, I'm hitting the high points. I'm not going to go through every 100 years of acting. But as we go through these different high points, I am going to touch on 3 things: the social and cultural standing and significance of actors, training, were they getting any training, and do we consider those actors to be professional actors or amateur actors? By professional, I mean, can they make a living? Is this how they manage to feed themselves? Okay, I don't think there's a time in theater's history when actors were respected more. In fact, it is during Greek theater that actors are actually revered. They are like priests. They're held in high social standing. Often they were political emissaries. They were well educated, trained. They could make a living off of acting. You will see here the images of actors. And to remind you of the significance of theater at this time, look at the size of the theaters these actors were working in. The stories, the narrative plays that actors were a part of were to the Greek culture so much more than simply entertainment. Remember, this is a part of their religion. So I think as far as actors go, we hit a high point real early. And I don't think we've ever quite reached the same social status as was given to Greek actors. Okay, so we're moving on to the Romans. Really, the Romans took what the Greeks were doing and expanded it. They built larger theaters. They incorporated more theater technology. They were doing Greek plays, but then they continued to create what were called entertainments. The Romans had a lot of street theater, acrobats, juggling, what we would consider today circus acts, etc. This is when the profession of acting becomes rather tainted because of theater's association with these kinds of entertainments. The Romans often conquered cultures, incorporated that culture, made those actors and artists slaves who continued to act but in Roman entertainments. This is a time when actors were still considered professional because that is how they were making their living, but we also see the rise again of a kind of amateur theater. Now keep in mind, theater at this time is lumped in with a lot of Roman entertainments, and one of those entertainments is gladiatorial games. So you can kind of see here already where if you're a part of theater, if you are part of these entertainments, you are associated with some really negative things going on in Roman theater. And this leads us to the next time period that I want to cover, medieval theater. When I left off, I was talking about how actors and theater was tainted because of its association with persecution of Christians, with gladiatorial games, street theater, etc. Well, when the Roman Empire falls, when the church is now the most powerful governing body, the church outlaws theater. So, therefore, unless it is church-sanctioned performances, which I will talk about briefly in a minute, you are outlaws if you are a part of theater. So you're not getting trained as an actor because you are only doing a kind of theater that is sanctioned by the church, or you are a part of an amateur traveling troupe, which is a kind of underground, that's what we would call it today, an underground theater that's often associated with nomads, gypsies, etc. Okay, so let's start there as I talk a little bit more about medieval theater. Those amateur traveling troupes. These are traveling troupes that are mostly families. Because theater is outlawed, they work off of non-scripted scenarios. They're outlines of scripts where they give all of, we've talked about dramatic structure. So they're giving the inciting incident, they're giving exposition, they're giving complications as if this were a play, and they are improvising dialogue. Now they might, within these scenarios, have little comedic bits that are repeatable from play to play. It's a very ensemble, meaning everyone has to really work together in order to make this kind of theater work. No one actor has the majority of the lines. Again, ensemble acting means that everyone is sharing in the limelight, the focus. They also used stock characters. Stock characters are characters that remain the same from play to play. We would think of them more as stereotypes of characters. You might see some sketch comedy shows that use a character type or a specific character every week on their sketch comedy show. That is taken from the tradition of stock characters. And they would have characters like two young lovers that were in every play. There would always be a servant character who is much smarter, cleverer than his master. If you have scenarios, stock characters with improvised dialogue, and a strong sense of ensemble, you can create some great entertaining dramas and comedies. So these are a kind of amateur group of actors who are traveling, they're doing plays on the outskirts of town. Now, there is also during medieval times, church-sanctioned theater, which is theater that is telling Bible stories, stories of saints. They are doing morality plays, plays which are to teach the congregation moral lessons, etc. Now these are plays that were started by the church priests, clergy, in order to communicate with the congregation. They became so popular that eventually the church turns over this kind of theater to the secular community. And we have then simultaneous settings and stages which are often built for the festival, for the play. When it is performed, all of that is taken down. But again, we see actors here that are they're not getting any kind of formal training. They're not making a living as actors. They're surviving by their regular day jobs. It's an interesting time for the theater too. This mix of church-sanctioned theater and secular theater. The Renaissance sees theater being more and more accepted for all classes. Of course, the Renaissance is a time in the arts where art is flourishing. So theater does as well as painting and music, and you see apprenticeship training now. Now we have actors who are part of official government-sanctioned, sponsored, they have patrons, but they're acting companies. So it is culturally accepted now, and actors get apprenticeship training. Although actors still are not always educated. They cannot always read or write or do both. It's amazing to me that this is Renaissance, English Renaissance. Shakespeare's actors often could not read. So they learned how to do all of that poetic dialogue by repetition over and over and over. It's one of the reasons that a lot of Renaissance playwrights wrote in poetic device, because it allowed the actors to lean on where the syllables and consonants were going to end and begin as far as learning the lines. Now we do see actors, professional. We see as professionals. We see popular acting companies. So the life of an actor is improving at this point. I think that actors are always still, during the Renaissance, looked on with a little bit of suspicion because they were seen as gypsies a lot of times prior to this. But hey, we do have names of actors, playwrights who wanted to be on stage. We can kind of see the life of actors today in some of these actors of the Renaissance. Okay, so we're going to make a huge jump from the 1700s Restoration Theater until 19th century theater. We transition into modern theater. As theater becomes more socially accepted, so does the profession of acting. We now see women on stage. Even through Renaissance, the female roles were portrayed by men. Women were not allowed on the public stage. Apprenticeship training is now becoming more standardized. It's fairer. Some of these apprenticeships actually pay the young actors for their work. We see acting schools. We see training programs grow. We see the worldwide fame for many actors. There are actors now who have fan clubs, plays that have playbills, so you can follow your favorite actor. And this became really the basis for the popularity and the the charisma and the excitement that we see around famous actors today. It starts during the 1700s. It actually starts a little bit with Shakespeare's theater as well. Okay, today's actors. Regardless of all the people involved in a play and making sure that that play happens, the theater audience most closely identifies with the actors. It is the actors that they see themselves as, those characters, etc. Successful actors must have a lot of determination. They must be willing to undergo endless years of training and work. Actors do not do their work alone. When involved in a production, they have to collaborate with other actors. The director, the designers, the playwright, and the audience all play a role. An actor needs all of those people to make that play happen. So even if they get most of the focus when they are in a play, they are still very much a part of a collaborative experience. In fact, it's really hard for actors to really practice their art, because you can memorize your lines, but until you are there with another actor, you can memorize your intentions, the emotions, but again, until you're there with another actor, you are really not considered to be acting. It takes another person. It takes that exchange. When we think of actors today, I think it's easy to forget that it is such a collaborative experience. There are traits, I think, that make some good actors. I think actors need to be intelligent, hardworking. They have to have a high level of commitment. I think being a people person, being intuitive, imaginative, having a certain level of confidence, obviously. Being an extrovert helps, although you'd be surprised by the number of actors who are actually quite shy. Having a lot of energy, and there is this unspoken quality that I think some of the most successful actors have, and that is of charisma. That charisma, that person that is so full of energy and is interesting that you just can't stop wanting to watch what they're doing. It is at this point, if we were still in a face-to-face class, I would have you do the class assignment worksheet about your favorite actor. So I want you to do that. You'll notice on that worksheet it's asking you to choose an actor that you really like or is your favorite actor. And let me tell you this, please don't choose actors because you think that they're attractive. I think that is a given. I want you to really focus on those acting skills. And there is a website, IMDb, Internet Movie Database, which is a good place for you to start researching. Where did they go to school? Do they have any kind of training that is interesting? What do you find about them that makes them your favorite actor? Those questions that are on that worksheet, you can find the answers to, again, online. So please do that. If you look at this slide, don't sit down and write down all of these different bullet points about what we consider to be the defining characteristics of actors today. I've made this slide because as my students have done this worksheet and we have had a class discussion about acting skills, and why we like the actors that we like. These are some of the things that you guys tell me. We like a certain level of believability. We want actors to be convincing as their characters. We don't want them to seem like they're acting. So we want a level of spontaneity to that performance. Comic timing, I'm skipping around here because I know you can read. Versatility, we now get to see actors, because of film and television, play a lot of roles where the characters are very different from one another. So we value those actors who can play lots of different characters and be believable as each of those characters. But these are some of the things that we're looking at and that I think you should consider when you're doing your worksheet. Here's where we get into the nuts and bolts of acting, the actor's tools. When actors are training, they focus on the actor's tools. Now, these tools are mind, body, and voice. We call them tools because the actor the actor considers their body, their voice, their mind, who they are. We have little but ourselves as our instrument. Again, actors really can't practice notes on a piano or playing a musical instrument. Actors do not have paintbrushes and a canvas. As actors, they only have themselves. So they're trying to perfect the use of their actors' tools in learning how to create believable and interesting characters on stage and in film. As you look at different training programs, you will see that different theories about actor training and different actor training programs focus on the actor's tools, but in different ways. So that's what I'm going to do as I continue. I'm going to define the actor's tools, but also I'm going to talk about the different approaches to actor training historically and where they combine today. Okay, the actor's tools. Mind, body, and voice. When you're talking about the tool of the mind, the actor really needs to be smart. I know this sounds kind of cruel, but stupid people don't make good actors, because it is the intellect that allows actors to analyze the script, to analyze the characters, to figure out actor beats, intentions, super objectives. These are all terms and tools that actors use when they're analyzing their character, why their character's there. The more information that you can give to an audience about your character, the better. So it is always good to be able to fully analyze what you think your character is really all about. Also, imagination is key. Part of what actors are doing is trying to get back to that place where we lack self-consciousness, where we are not afraid of what people think about us. We are using our imagination to create a sense of play. You will often walk by actors in an acting class and think they look like they're just being silly. That's part of actors trying to get back, again, to that freeing space, that space where we can imagine like we did when we were children. Also, when it comes to the tool of the mind, acting takes a lot of concentration. Actors generally need to be good at multitasking. They have to keep their focus when there are other things happening around them on stage, around them when they're making films. Acting requires a high level of concentration to remember your lines, where you're supposed to be on stage, what is my character supposed to be feeling, who am I supposed to be listening to. All of those things come into play with the actor's tool of the mind. When actors are training their body, they want to be physically healthy. You might be portraying a character who is in a sword fight or has to dance and sing. You might be portraying a character who's on stage for 2 hours and has a lot of lines. That can be physically debilitating. So you try to keep yourself as healthy as you can. Most actors take stage movement courses, classes that help them have good posture, to be centered, to be able to gauge their gestures. The actors I admire the most are often actors who have the ability to perform on stage with really larger gestures and a vocal quality that even people sitting far away from them can see. A lot of film actors do not have that versatility, and there are stage actors who can't bring it down to a camera that is that close. So you take movement classes so you are self-aware and have the instincts to be able to go from acting in one on stage, acting in the other in a film. Also, actors want to be able to get a lot of jobs. So you're trying to learn dance steps, stage combat, anything that might help you get that job. When you're auditioning, they ask you, can you do a stage slap? And you want to be able to say, yes, I can do that. Not really slap someone, a stage slap, but fake it. When you are taking voice classes, you are learning to have good articulation and pronunciation. You know, we all have a tendency to speak the way the people around us speak. We slightly mispronounce words. When you're in the theater especially, sound degrades the further it moves away from the body. So it will sound like mumbling if you do not have good articulation and pronunciation. And I'm talking of things like, you know, here in Texas we have a tendency to say, I'm just going to go to the store, instead of, I'm just going to go to the store. We want to get rid of any regional dialect that we might have and learn again to have really good articulation, correctly pronounce words. Also, stage actors especially are learning to have good volume, breath support, and vocal flexibility to be able to talk in a deep register or a bit higher register if need be. That vocal flexibility on stage, voice work, is particularly important. That vocal flexibility to be able to portray different ages, different characters, etc. So, when an actor is in acting school, these are the things that they're taking classes in. They're taking classes that are helping them use the tool of the mind, improvisation with their imagination, and analyzing that script. They are taking courses to help them have better posture, to be able to do stage combat, and for voice classes, they want everyone in that theater, regardless of the size of that theater, to be able to hear them, to have good breath support, not lose their voice from overuse from night to night. These are the actor's tools. Whatever approach you have to acting, you are focused on these three things to varying degrees. As mentioned before, I'm going to go in depth with two different approaches to actor training. And today, I think most actors use a little bit of both approaches. The first, of course, is the oldest approach. We today would call this presentational acting. The reference being that you are presenting, you are not trying to hide the fact that you are acting. This is the primary acting style of performances from ancient Greece until the 19th century. When actors were performing for hundreds of years, they were trying to be like the character, to represent a character to a certain degree, but they were not trying to go for a slice of life believability, a level of reality and believability, what we would call a natural acting style that we expect today. In fact, audiences would often be a little put out, unhappy if they couldn't see that an actor was acting. We would look at this acting style and see it as being very fake and, not real, even though today this acting style is still used in things like musicals, some non-realistic genres and plays, absurdism, symbolism, for example. A lot of times when classics are being performed, actors use a very presentational acting style. So does children's theater. So again, this is not something that you don't see anymore, but it is not the only acting style as it was in the past. The idea behind this is, again, that the audience is always aware that the actors are acting. There was an acting teacher, Francois Delsarte. In fact, he wrote a book, Delsarte's System of Oratory and Gestures, in which he gives a lot of diagrams, advice about gestures, postures, etc., that are suggestions to actors that they employ these gestures, facial expressions, and they can piece together a performance. Now, the gestures, the postures, the things that he had in his book were based on what was working for other successful actors. What did the audience expect actors to be? It was a very cookie-cutter kind of approach to acting. Now, this is at a time when there wasn't as much diversity in styles of plays. So this is a kind of acting that actually really worked for a lot of these actors. The emphasis is on the physical. At the time, they thought they were being more natural than their predecessors, but remember, the predecessors often used masks. And so, of course, this would seem, even though we see these gestures and facial expressions as being more animated, not as believable, to them it is a matter of degree. They thought they were being very analytical in how they were putting together these performances. Today, you will hear this called working from the outside in. Sometimes you will hear theater people talk about a very technical approach to acting. That means that the actor is experimenting and finding, how does my character walk? How does my character sound? Do they have any infirmities? Do they have any kind of identifiable vocal qualities that are different maybe than their real speaking voice? Again, presentational acting is really acting that seems fake, not as real, and we still see it today. But there is a big shift that happens in theater that leads to the next approach to actor training. Okay, we're moving on. Representational acting. Representational is that slice of life, natural acting style that we've come to see as quote unquote good acting. The reason we have a representational acting style now is because presentational acting was a style of acting perfected by actors who were not doing realism. Realism as a style in the theater did not begin until the 19th century. We look at Anton Chekhov, Henrik Ibsen, Strindberg. These are playwrights at the turn of the 19th into the 20th century who were called the fathers of realism. They are now writing plays, realistic plays, in which the actors talk more about themselves. There are no sword fights. There's just less action on stage. It is theater that is more about the human condition. It is also theater that is about everyday people. It's not all about kings and queens and what they're doing. So when realism becomes popular, there needs to be a change, because the actors who are performing in these new realistic plays, you know what? They don't make those characters come alive. It's not working. They seem, well, fake, kind of boring. So with realism, directors, and one of the first is Konstantin Stanislavski. His assistant is Vladimir Demirovich Danchenko. A lot of people believe that he is crucial in training actors for this new style of realism. They're working with the plays of Anton Chekhov. And these are light comedies. And again, there's a lot of comedy in the tone, in the delivery of the lines, that is supposed to be very real, and that's where the humor lies. But as the actors of that time period do the plays, and they pose and they use these well-worn gestures, they're not being accepted. So they decide to start a different way of teaching actors. Instead of focusing so much on the tools of the mind and the voice, they begin to focus on what had previously been ignored, and that is the tool of the mind. They believed that the physical was a given. They believed that for the actor, they needed to find a psychological truth of their character, have an understanding of their character. This is where we start seeing the idea of acting is believing. This is an idea that is embraced by the film community as well. It is the idea that the audience no longer wants to see actors acting. It is the idea that the audience is a voyeur, that they are looking through a fourth wall. You know, if you look at the stage, especially a proscenium stage, it is as if the actors are in a room with four distinct walls, and we are secretly watching what's happening within that room, within those four walls, because one of those walls is invisible and is letting us look in. It is that idea that imagination is everything to an actor. It is emphasized and trained. Actors now go out and observe reality, and instead of trying to create a character and an acting style that is based on a copy of a copy, as far as physical gestures and movement, they are basing their characters now on the imagination. They imagine as an actor, you imagine, what does it feel like to be an older person, to be someone whose knees hurts, you know, maybe your elbow hurts. It's a level of specificity that is lacking from the previous actor focus, from what the previous actors were doing. This is where we start seeing things like emotional recall. Sometimes it's called emotional memories. Here's a very cliched example. You have a kid who's in a scene. You want them to be crying. They're crying, but they're not crying real tears. Just doesn't seem right. You don't believe them, so you take them aside and you say, "Hey, remember last week when your dog Ralphie got hit by that car? And now the kid screws up their face gets red, they start crying real tears, they're really upset, and you put them in the scene, and you say, okay, do the scene now. And now the kid is reacting to a character who's maybe his father is leaving him with a level of reality that is appropriate to the scene. This is what adult actors are doing when they say, I rode around in a cop car for 2 weeks to learn what it was like. They are using a form of the magic if or emotional recall. The magic if is, what if I were in this situation? So you're constantly analyzing, and you're constantly using your emotions. Inspiration is valued here. This is a really good actor training method, especially for film actors who can do many different takes, who can do a lot of different emotional responses in a scene as they manipulate their own emotions throughout it. Often you will hear this working from the inside out. By the way, an important name, Lee Strasberg. I mentioned Stanislavski and the Moscow Art Theater, retraining actors, etc. Well, Stanislavski writes a few really famous books, gets a lot of attention. There are many acting teachers who now go and observe what they're doing with the Moscow Art Theater. One of those is Lee Strasberg, who comes back and with some of his colleagues coins the term the method. And in the method, again, emotional recall and having an honesty and an authenticity in your emotion using your imagination is at the center of all of the acting exercises, all of the training with those actors. In fact, he lived well into his 90s. He trained some of the best actors on stage and in film of the 20th century. Everyone from Al Pacino, James Dean, Dustin Hoffman to Bradley Cooper. Bradley Cooper, where did he go to school? The Actors Studio, which was Lee Strasberg's school that he started early in the 20th century. It is hard to find an actor today who does not in some way follow the ideas put forth by Lee Strasberg. So, there are some other big names as acting teachers besides Strasberg. They were contemporaries of his: Stella Adler, Sanford Meisner, Uta Hagen. You can do a Google search on these acting teachers. You can find out that they still have acting schools, training programs. They'll give you a list of all the famous actors that have succeeded because of their training program. But know that what you really want to do as an actor is get a good background in a variety of different ideas about acting. Find out what works best for you. Acting was not actually part of a university degree until Carnegie Tech started a program in 1914. Prior to that, you had to just risk it all and go to a professional theater to learn from others how to act, etc. You could get degrees from other teachers. There were definitely teachers and schools out there, but unless you became very successful as an actor, that degree really kind of meant nothing. So today you can go to an accredited program and get a degree, and most of these universities have actor training, as well as technical theater training, directing, playwriting, etc. That is very good, and you will actually get an accredited degree, and they will often have internship programs where you can go and work with these professionals to train. It is a really good way to learn a lot from professionals and not just go out there and, starve for a while until you start getting jobs. So, characterization. That's what actors are trying to do. With all of this talk about the actor's tools, training, the actors over time, from the beginning until now, they are trying to build a characterization. So all the information that an actor is putting together is going toward that characterization. You have another class assignment in Blackboard that is on acting, and it is for you to write a basic character analysis. And when you're writing that, you're basically giving information about a character. Now, some of this is information that, it's in the script, but there's other stuff where you're having to read between the lines, and you are supposed to be imagining and building the character. And you can do that based on these levels. The levels of characterization are based on how much information is being given to the audience. The lowest level of characterization is characterization, things that we know just by looking at an actor on stage. Their physiological traits. What is their gender, their height, weight, ethnicity, etc. The second level of characterization, we're getting more information about that character, and it's based on their social function. What kind of clothing are they wearing? What information have they exchanged as far as dialogue? How they work in the room? Are they a butler? Is this the pizza delivery guy? Is this the CEO of a company? The third level of characterization is based on psychological habits and mannerisms. You know how you watch people, and I know have friends who have nonverbals, the way that they gesture, move. You can see and recognize your friend from across the parking lot because of the way they walk, their habits and physical mannerisms. So you've seen these characters enough that they have an identifiable habit, mannerism, physicalization that is tied to their psychology, their how they feel about themselves. A shy person is not going to be as animated or big in their gestures, for example, as someone who is not shy. The fourth level of characterization is usually gotten to by most supporting characters reach this level because you have an overall idea about their attitude toward life. Are they a glass half full person, a glass half empty? You can kind of predict now how they're going to react to the other characters on stage. Now, the next two, the higher levels of characterization, the audience is getting even more information. Most of your lead characters reach an emotional decision-making level. I think we look at the importance of being earnest, and we can say that yes, all of those major characters, Jack and Algernon especially, we see them making decisions, acting on stage in a way that is in touch with their emotions, and we understand fully those characters. Not every play has a character that's making a moral decision. We will see that in A Raisin in the Sun, our final play of the semester. You will see a sixth level characterization. Oedipus, definitely, that's a sixth level character. The audience, by the time that play is over, they have watched this character make a choice that is not in his own self-interest. It is in the interest of Thebes, of his children. He punishes himself. That is a sixth level character. Again, we don't always see that in modern plays today. But the levels of characterization can be very useful to actors who understand that information in a performance is key. That you might have a character that on the written page reaches only a third level of characterization. But if you add to those physiological traits, a social function, habits and mannerisms that you recognize, if you see an overall consistent attitude that the actor is very committed to in their performance, they have just made what is a simple character a more memorable character. If you watch Importance of Being Earnest on YouTube like I want you to, you will see that the butler character in the more modern version with Colin Firth reaches the fourth level of characterization, and that is because of his attitude.